everyone. You are in the final lap of this year's Summer Policy Summit, and I am so happy and so excited to be here before you this morning because I have the most amazing panel to introduce you to. I have the most amazing topic, and you are witnessing history in the making because this is the first time that the Supplier and Workforce Diversity Subcommittee has a general session. And I want to thank President Nick Wagner for that opportunity. I don't know where you are, Nick, right now. Oh, there you go, you're right in front of me. I really appreciate your theme of leading the way. You're definitely leading NARUC in the right way by having this diversity and inclusion discussion on the main stage this summer. So I hope you've all filled out the survey that's on the NARUC app because I'm going to be unveiling the results in a little bit. And I also hope that you took a look at our resolutions that our subcommittee unanimously voted to pass out of committee, and hopefully they will be approved this afternoon. So let's get our panelists on the stage. Then I'm going to share a couple facts, and I'm going to tell you a quick story. So Anne Pramaggiore, Senior Vice President and CEO of Exelon Utilities, is here with us. Anne, please come on stage. And next we have Paula Glover, President and CEO of the American Association of Blacks in Energy. Paula. Then we have DC Chairman Willie Phillips, who is also Vice Chair of the Supplier and Workforce Diversity Subcommittee. And we have Susan Story, CEO of American Water. All right, so let me tell you a couple of facts. In 2017, I was appointed to the Illinois Commerce Commission, and that made me the first Latina to hold this position. Then in 2019, I was named chair of the Supplier and Workforce Diversity Subcommittee, making me the first Latina to hold that position. In the entire country, there are only 5 Hispanic commissioners, and 2 of us sit in Illinois. So those facts are a little telling that I think we could do a little bit better in our industry. Now let me tell you a story about why this topic of supplier and workforce diversity matters to me and why it's important. So when I was little, I didn't speak English until I started school. I'm a Cuban-American first-generation girl, and I spent my childhood in the car with my grandmother before I started school because she was my grandfather's delivery man. And we would deliver dentures. My grandfather made dentures. So we went all over the city of Chicago delivering dentures, and my job in the back seat of her light blue Monza was to make sure that the dentures didn't fly out of the laundry basket they were in. So I remember thinking, whenever we went to the dentist's office and dropped off those dentures, wow, that's really cool that every dentist speaks Spanish. That's great. But I didn't realize until later that a qualification of being a dentist wasn't speaking Spanish, but that my grandfather wasn't getting work outside of Hispanic communities. And even though he was incredibly successful, I often wonder how much more successful he could have been if he had gotten work outside of Hispanic communities, how many more jobs he could have created, how many more dental labs he could have opened. So that's why this discussion matters. So let's unveil the results of the survey, which I'm so thankful to all of you for participating in. Okay, so for the first question, and I'll run through this pretty quickly because I don't want to take time away from our speakers. Who should be expected to take the initiative in increasing diversity and inclusion initiatives? So most of you said utility companies, and second, work commissions, and last place, lawmakers. What sector services struggle the most with implementing diversity and inclusion? Legal professionals came in first, and financial came in second. What can NARUC do to help facilitate diversity across the country in industries we regulate? And it almost a tie between roundtable discussions and workshops. Do commissions have a responsibility to push diversity and inclusion initiatives within their state? 75% of you said yes. Do utilities have a responsibility to ensure that the companies they do business with are diverse? 81% of you said yes. Should parent companies implement diversity initiatives for their subsidiaries? 95% of you said yes. Who would be best suited to lead the utility industry toward inclusion and diversity? 49% of you said utility parent companies, 22% of you said commissions, and you can see the other results. What's the best way to train a diverse workforce for leadership positions? And most of you said corporate leadership training, and second, mentorships. I want to go back because as we're having this discussion, some of you asked what is the definition and what's included in diversity, and I will have on the screen for your perspective what the Supplier and Workforce Diversity Subcommittee came up with last year at their meeting under the leadership of former Commissioner Rachel Eubanks. So let's begin with Ann Pramaggiore. Can you tell us what your organization, what your company Exelon is doing to take the driver's seat with the Diversity and Inclusion Initiative?
Sure. Good morning, and thank you, Commissioner Oliva. I think this is a wonderful topic and a wonderful panel. I'm delighted to be here and appreciate your sponsorship on this very important issue. I just wanted to make a few sort of general comments on what tremendous opportunity I think our industry has, given where we're poised in the economic transition and how we affect the communities on this issue. I think this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to make a difference, and I think this industry is uniquely positioned to make an impact, and that's for several reasons. One is we are universal service providers. We are reach in terms of the people we touch and impact in every community, and the fact that we are located physically in just about every community in this United States gives us the ability to create jobs, to create momentum going forward in this area. Also, we are at the forefront of technology. We are the gateway to the technological future in many ways. And we also touch on the biggest social issues of our time, climate change and social equity. And that means the jobs that we're creating are both relevant and enduring. And finally, I think as an industry, and this is most critical to the people in this room, we have a convening ability that most industries do not have because of being regulated. The regulators in this industry can create momentum, can create consistency, and can have an impact that is broad and deep in a way that other industries can't. And so I think we've got a great opportunity to lead the way on this issue for the United States economy, and I'm excited about it. What we're doing in Exelon is we have a strong commitment from the very top of the organization, Chris Crane. And in fact, Chris has taken over the chairmanship of EEI for the next year, and he has chosen as his signature initiative workforce development. And his goal is to ensure that all our companies, and we do, have programs that reach out into the community, but to export that across all the utilities that are part of EEI, and virtually all of them do have programs, but to create some consistency in how we reach out into the community and open up these future jobs moving forward. But we think of our work in sort of three areas. One is workforce and culture inside the company. Second is how we reach out into the community to generate opportunities. And the third is supplier diversity. And we have programs in all three of those areas. And just to highlight, I'll sort of take one lane to, I guess, express how we think about developing a pipeline, that our responsibility is not simply to go find people who might be available, people of color and women who might be available to positions, but actually build that pipeline. So we have taken a focus on women in STEM, and 48% of the workforce is female, yet about 24% of the STEM jobs are female. So underrepresentation clearly there. We have educational programs at the elementary school level on energy and science. We support almost 400 schools in our various jurisdictions where we train teachers and provide curriculum for giving kids opportunity and opening the doors to science. We have programs for middle school and high school girls for experiential learning. We have what we call the Icebox Derby, which we've introduced in Chicago. We're taking it across our other jurisdictions, Chairman. But basically, it's a program every summer. We bring 30 girls in. We put them in 6 different teams. We give them a ComEd engineering mentor, a set of engineering drawings, a recycled refrigerator, and they turn those refrigerators into race cars that they race at the end of the summer. So they build these cars all summer long and then race them at the end of the summer. So experiential learning. We try to bring them into internships in the company. We have scholarship programs that we offer for those girls as well. So really looking to build the pipeline, and that's our philosophy, whether it's supplier diversity or filling these jobs and developing for the future, is really creating the pipeline, not sitting back and waiting for it to come to us. So I will stop there. I think I've taken my minutes, and I appreciate that very much.
Sure. And before I get to Paula, I was so excited to tell my story that I forgot to introduce someone you haven't seen at all since Sunday, President Nick Wagner. Sorry. Okay.
I was waiting for Michelle to tell me when I was supposed to walk up here.
That's what I thought. Okay. Paula.
Sure. So, for people who may not be familiar with the association, we are a professional association in that I have individual members who work in the energy industry across all sectors. So not just people in utilities, but people who work in oil and natural gas, upstream, midstream, downstream, folks who are regulators, folks who are policymakers, folks who are academics and students. So we do cover very broad bandwidth. And so I want to take my time to talk about some of the things that we think about as an association, and quite frankly, things that I share with audiences like this around the world when it comes to diversity, and those are 3 things. One, I really appreciate that you shared the survey results early, because I would say, and since we're in Indianapolis and talking about race cars, if you're familiar with what endurance race car driving is, so things like the Daytona 24 or Le Mans, it's about a team, right? So there may be a racer who wins the race, but the truth of the matter is that he doesn't do it without the team behind him and those other 2 drivers who drive with him. And when you follow endurance race car driving, there are a lot of races where you will find that one person is in the lead until the very last lap. And a $10 part and a car breaks, and now they're 45th, right? So it shares with you the importance of having a team behind you. And so I would suggest that who takes the lead on diversity in this industry are the companies and the commissions collectively and together. That's actually not just the companies doing their part. If we looked around this room, and it is fairly diverse, but I would suggest that there are a lot that commissions can do within their own entities and bodies to make sure that they are reflective of the jurisdictions in which they serve. So that would be the first thing that I would share. The second thing that we talk about often is that you need to measure what gets measured matters. But what I would say is that those measures, it's science, it's not art, and that you measure everything at multiple points. So it's not just about what is my diverse spend in total. It is what are the categories that that money is spent in, and who is spent within those categories. And not because you're trying to say what's good or what's bad, but because it tells you a little bit about how well things are going, right? Do you see groups that are doing really well within a broad spectrum? Do we see that women are doing well and service-disabled veterans are not? And that allows you to adjust. So you should be measuring and measuring often and all different kinds of levels. And I would say the same would be true for culture in our organizations, and there are ways to measure the culture. So when we talk about inclusion, which quite frankly is a very hard work, you got to measure inclusion, and you got to understand what your culture is, and then you can begin to figure out how you shift it. So that would be the second thing. But the third thing I would say is that we all want to see ourselves represented. And so it's important for us to think about not only talking about when we are not represented, but noticing when someone else isn't represented. And I'll share with you guys a story. Several weeks ago at EE Global, and Anna's heard this story, I was on a panel about diversity with 3 African American women. There were probably 15 to 20 panels throughout this day. And at the end of the panel, someone came to me and said, you know, I think it's interesting that you would have a panel on diversity and only 7% of the population was represented. Those were his direct words. And I was irritated, because I thought, wow, that you had the nerve to say it. But my response to him was this: I think it's interesting that you did not notice that in all the other panels, we weren't. Right, so there were 3 African American women on one panel an entire day, and we were nowhere else in that day. And so I think it is important not only that we recognize when we're not represented, but that we need to recognize when someone else is not represented and do something about that, because I think that's actually how you get there. And so that is kind of the 3 things I like to offer.
Thanks, Paula. Chairman Phillips, talk to us about what the DC Commission is doing without having rulemaking or legislation that addresses this.
Absolutely. Thank you. And before I address the question, I just want to acknowledge that it's not lost on me, as you said, Commissioner, the gravity of this moment, that we are on this general session stage talking about this issue. And I did what I always do when I think I'm doing something important. I went and talked to my mentor about what to say today. And it surprised me. When I asked the question, I said, no, this is so important. Diversity is one of the things that makes us great. And the person then said to me, you know, I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure I buy it. You know, I know people say that, but, you know, prove it. And it made me take a step back. And I had to think about it for a moment. And and what I said was, diversity is the secret sauce that makes us great. And what I mean by that is not just diversity in race, but diversity in thought and experience. That, if innovation is something that you value, then you should also value diversity. If you look at many of the great organizations, companies, cities, countries, they value diversity. And there are studies that prove that when you have a diverse organization, you actually can have higher profits. So there's a business case for diversity, but I want to share a story too. If it were not for a minority program, you wouldn't even know me. I submit to you, I wouldn't be on this stage. I went to undergrad as an MLK scholar on a full ride. And then I went to a law firm after law school, and where I was one of 2 African-American associates out of 200 associates in my office. And but for a partner mentoring me, sponsoring me, helping me when I made mistakes, I tell you right now, you wouldn't know my name. And so every commissioner, every executive in this audience, there's something that you can do. You can go to your local institution. You can pick one of the top 10 minorities in that institution, bring them to your company, train them to become a leader. And I know you can do that because someone did it for me. And I have done it for others. So I'm out of time. Can I still address your question? Yes. So we have a volunteer program in DC, and it's not completely unique. I see Commissioner Harriet Gray, who has been a great supporter of Supplier Workforce Diversity Committee and of this session today. Delaware has a similar program where we went to the utilities. This came out of NARUC, the UMA committee, which was the predecessor of our committee, under the leadership of Harold Williams of Maryland. We negotiated an agreement where utilities have a target, a goal every year. They report on it annually. This was renegotiated in 2012 under the leadership of former Commissioner Lori Murphy Lee in DC. And now, since then, we've incorporated those goals into merger commitments, because we've had both PEPCO and Washington Gas have mergers, and in those merger commitments, they are also required to meet those supplier workforce diversity goals. So that's to answer your question.
Thanks, Chairman. Susan?
So thank you, Commissioner Oliva, and thank you, President Wagner, for the fact that we're sitting up here in the general session. And Ann and Paul and the chairman I've known for a long time, and they are incredible leaders and trailblazers in this area. We're going to talk a lot about what's and how, so what I want to do is take just a couple of minutes about why. And I know everyone in this room has their own ideas about why inclusion and diversity is so important. But I want to remind you, almost 2 years ago from today, on August the 12th, 2017, there was a tragedy in Charlottesville, Virginia. There was a white nationalist rally, and there were peaceful protests, and a person decided to drive his car into a crowd and killed one young woman and injured 28. Our executive team at American Water was in Pittsburgh at the time, and the reason I'm telling this story is it's been said that culture trumps strategy and eats it for breakfast, and I think that's true. So we were in a meeting in Pittsburgh, and the word got to us what had happened in Charlottesville, and we stopped our meeting, and we said, we have 7,200 people across the country from coast to coast. Do our employees feel safe? Do they feel safe physically? Do they feel safe emotionally? So our communications department, and Aldi Warnick is here and he remembers this day, our communications department said, Susan, here's a draft of something you can send out to your employees. And I looked at it and I said, thanks, but I think this needs to come from me personally. So we took a 15-minute break, and I sat down and I wrote out a note for our employees across the country. And in that note, I talked about the fact that we were a place that every person, every single person, regardless of where they lived, what their demographic was, what they believed, that they were safe at work. That we were a place where every single person was going to be respected. And in that, I coined a term that I had heard years ago when I heard about the beauty of a tapestry where every single thread in and of itself is a beautiful, vibrant color, but when it comes together for a picture, nothing can touch it. So I coined the term beautifully different, and in this note I said, every one of us is beautifully different, but we're also bound by a vision and a noble cause of what we do every day, which is to make sure that at the end of every water pipe, people can give their children water and trust that it's safe. That at every fire hydrant, lives are depending on the fact that the pressure's there. And every wastewater plant is a barrier between our customers and disease. I was really amazed at the response to that note when it went out. It was a short note, but it was very personal. And our Inclusion and Diversity Council of the company, co-chaired by Val Armstrong, I don't know if Val's here, some of you know her, basically decided to do a survey of our employees, and they sent out a note at #BeautifullyDifferent and said, tell us why you're beautifully different. The response was overwhelming. We don't have time to look at the full video we composed, but rather than me talk about culture and the importance, I've got a 2-minute video with our employees telling you what it means to be with a company where they can celebrate being beautifully different. If you would roll that video, please. think that speaks more powerfully than anything I could say. So just to kind of wrap up, I would tell you that, you know, with a culture, it means that it permeates everything we do in terms of how we hire, how we develop people, what's important, how we run our supplier diversity. And I will tell you that I'm very proud that just in the past few months, we've received several external recognitions, and later I can talk about the programs that led there, but we just found out last week the Disability Equality Index had 9 companies globally who scored a perfect 100% on the Disability Employer Best Place to Work, and American Water was one of those. We're very excited about that. Last year, the NAACP launched their first inaugural Equality Index, Equality and Inclusion Index. We were included on that. Bruce Hawk, who's the president of Illinois American, will receive the National Inclusion and Diversity Award by the Black Chamber of Commerce, just recently received that this year. The Bloomberg Equality Index, Gender Equality Index, named us to their list in January of the companies for gender equality in the country. The New York Stock Exchange has started a board advisory council with 15 CEOs, and I was asked to be one of the CEOs along with the CEOs of Coca-Cola, Delta, Merck, Procter & Gamble, and some other companies. And also from a military standpoint, we've received 5 or 6 recognitions in terms of being a best place for vets to work, best place for veteran supplier diversity, and also a best place for veteran spouse employment that we're really proud of. Also in California, I don't know if the California Commissioner's still here. Kevin Tilden, our Senior Executive over External Affairs, was just recognized by the California LGBTQ Caucus and Governor Newsom for being one of the leaders throughout the state of California who has done more to help elect people of LGBTQ than almost anybody else in the state. So we're very proud of those recognitions, and I think that speaks louder than I can talk about a lot of the activities. The last thing I would tell you is that in 2018, over 50% of the move and hires, when we move people into job or hires we made in our company, were to minorities, women, veterans, and those with different abilities. And also from supplier diversity, we've increased our supplier diversity by 64% in the past 5 years, and $1 out of every 4 is spent with diverse suppliers. So culture, when you get that fixed, these other things aren't as hard to do.
President Wagner, can you talk about what NARUC is doing in the diversity and inclusion and supplier and workforce diversity space, and what initiatives you think NARUC should be implementing?
Certainly, and I don't think, I mean, you've given me credit for this panel. You make it very, very hard to say no. I want to tell you, the committee asked, I think it was even before the February meeting, and I'm like, I haven't got through the February meeting. Let's do that first. But they provided very, well thought out, laid out agenda and everything. So it's hard to say no to you, but it's a very important topic, and I think that's part of it too. And it's important to me. It's important what we're doing at NARUC because of, I look at it from a diversity of thoughts, ideas, beliefs. We all have different backgrounds, and when we understand each other's backgrounds, it helps us understand the work that we do and the other people that are out there. And so I think that's critically important for us to know. And so from the work that we're doing at NARUC, I know from my perspective, one of the things that I look at is, do we have geographic diversity in our committees, on our chairs, on our board? Do we have gender diversity? Do we have ethnic diversity? And again, it's looking at the whole thing. And I tell you, I actually have a spreadsheet where I keep track of some of this stuff to see how many do we have, to make sure that we're not getting tilted one way or the other. Because again, I think there's a tendency, particularly in today's society, to sort of surround yourself and put yourself in an echo chamber. And when you do that, if everybody's telling you, you've got great ideas, and you may have a really crappy idea, you need someone there saying, yeah, that's probably not the right way to go. Have you thought about it like this? Usually for me, that's my wife. But I think, it's critically important, again, because that diversity of thought helps us make better decisions. So as commissioners, when we are looking at the decisions we're making, we have that opportunity to think about the people that may not be in the same situation as us. And I think, again, it's very easy to think about just our situation, and everybody's in that same situation. And so I think, that's why the poverty simulation was an excellent, I had, like I said, the opportunity to step in there. And it sort of gives you a new perspective on things. And I think anytime you can have that conversation, then it's helpful for our decision making. And I think, obviously it's an important topic. I mean, look at how full the room is. You've got people here on the third day of the conference when most people at this point in time are completely blanked because we've been through so much in the last couple days. But I mean, it's a testament to the topic, and I appreciate you in the committee and the work you do on it.
Thank you. So we saw the survey results, and one of the questions that I wanted to address this morning, and it's the title, who should be in the driver's seat? One of the questions was, who should be expected to take the initiative in increasing diversity and inclusion initiatives? And 60% of those polls said utility companies. But then another question, do commissions have a responsibility to push diversity and inclusion initiatives within their state? And 75% said yes. So should commissions be mandating diversity and inclusion for their regulated utilities? Should they be mandating just reporting on what they spend on supplier diversity? Should they step away and hope that the utilities do it on a voluntary basis? What are your thoughts on that? Anybody?
Chairman, I will defer to you.
I'll jump in real quick. I actually think the answer is a little bit of both, but I'll tell you why I lean toward commissions. Commissions, we have a duty, we have an obligation to keep our eye on the public interest. And I think that this is an issue that is in the public interest. And so it's the commission that stands at the intersection of what utilities want to do, what consumers want to do, and what is prudent to do. Now, when it comes to the question of mandating, that's not the approach that we took in DC. And so I think that it's better to work out an agreement, to have a voluntary program. And I think that there's a role that utilities have to play in that.
Yeah, I was I don't think that regulators have to mandate. I think you simply have to suggest that it's an important initiative and that it is in the public interest. And I think, utilities, we get that. I mean, we're working on it, and we understand a request and a priority of our regulators. And so I think it's a joint effort, and I think there's, different roles for the different sides of the industry. But I think we're getting there. I see a lot of attention paid to this. But I do think you just have to indicate that it's a priority to you, and you will get a response from the utilities.
I absolutely agree with Ann and the chairman. In talking about what we're doing, we don't have quotas in our company. And I don't think mandates are the way to go, because then you get the hands, but you may not get really the head and the heart and the commitment. I think measuring is good. I think targets are good. I think making it a focus, talking about it is good. But again, you don't want rote compliance. What you want is people doing it because they recognize it's not only the right thing to do, it's a smart business decision. I mean, to reflect your communities, to reflect your customers, to understand them, to me, it's a business decision, if nothing else. And to not do that is very short-sighted, I think.
Paula?
No, I would agree with what everyone said. I would also say that, this can be a journey that commissions and companies can take together. And that I think in that shared experience, what commissions then can sometimes appreciate is the challenges that companies face when they're trying to meet whatever their goals and objectives are, because the commissions will see those things in them. They'll experience those same things as they try to diversify their staffs. As we start to think as an association, we think about how do you have a more diverse commissioner base across the country. We want policymakers to be reflective of our demographics in this country. And so there are a lot of challenges, and if we're doing that together, I think, to Chair Wagner's point, it fosters much better communication about what our issues and our problems are, and then how we can meet those.
President Wagner, I mean, you talk to commissioners from all over the country. Have you heard something similar, that, it should be a stakeholder process together.
I agree with everything that's said, and you know, and ironically, there are a lot of states that the law does require certain diversity on commissions. Most of the time, it's political balance. But in Iowa, we do have both political and gender balance. So of course, when I was the only male, the other two board members like to joke and say, aren't you glad we have that law so that we would have you? And yes, I was glad. And I actually voted for, that's one of them I actually voted for. But so it's interesting, and I think, I think Susan and Willie both mentioned that when you look at the statistics, when you have diversity within your company and business, you do have better profits and better things. And so from a mandate perspective, I think that gets difficult because we would all, if you asked us sitting up here on the stage, we would all have a different opinion on what that diversity should be. And that sort of kind of completely eliminates the whole idea of diversity. And so I think you've got to, again, sort of let that ebb and flow. And I think that, is the conversations that most commissions are having is more just along the line of, and the conversations like Ann mentioned of, have the conversation with utilities. It's really funny how commissioners can just ask a question and utilities like, oh, I think that commissioner wants me to go do this. And then off they go, and you're like, why are you doing that? Well, Commissioner, you asked about it. I'm just asking. I didn't want you to do it. So that, we do have the power of persuasion as commissioners.
Were you surprised by any of the survey results? For example, the question, what sector services struggle the most with implementing diversity and inclusion? And the majority said the legal profession. Now I know that Exelon / ComEd had a mentorship program where one of your leading regulatory work law firms started mentoring a minority-owned law firm. So it probably isn't surprising to you, but can you talk about that program?
Sure, thanks. I think what we recognize is that in the professional services realm, there's some serious underrepresentation, and so we've focused on that at the company. One of the things we do in terms of managing, our pension money, we've purposely gone out to diversify the company's organizations that we use in that realm, and in our legal supply chain, we have also done a couple things. One is we ask that the majority firms that we use put consistently a person of color or a woman on the work that they're doing for us. So the project that they're doing for us, that there be someone represented on the project. And then what we did specifically at ComEd was we looked at the regulatory legal front, and we said, not very diverse. How can we, again, sort of create the pipeline and sort of get some things launched? So we asked a couple of the firms that we use and have used for years, very strong regulatory practices, to mentor a Latino firm and an African-American firm, and on regulatory law, and work with them, sort of partner with them on cases, and start to develop a pipeline in the regulatory area specifically. So that was something that we kicked off there, I guess about 1.5 years, 2 years ago now.
Paula, do you have any thoughts? Were you surprised that legal professions came in first as the sector that struggles the most?
No, I think all professional services struggle more, and I think to some extent it's people have a hard time trying to figure out who you can partner with, where you can find people. But I think the other challenge is that if people haven't been there in a really long time, if you haven't had African-American law firms or accounting firms dealing with participating in this industry, you're not going to wake up tomorrow and all of a sudden find a bunch. And so mentoring programs that ComEd has taken on are really important so that people understand how this business operates, what those nuances are, how you work the politics, how you understand 4 sets of books in a regulatory structure. You've got to have some experience in that. And so, you know, the mentoring is a great way to kind of get you there, because otherwise what happens is we're looking for people who have a certain set of skill sets, and they're very specific in particular in a utility business. And then we say, it's really hard for me to find somebody who is diverse to do this work. Well, that's because they've never been allowed to do the work before. And so unless you have some creative solutions, you're never going to get there. It's you know, it's kind of like saying, I have a job and I want somebody to have these specific skill sets and do it the way that my company has always done it. Well, then that suggests to me that you really don't want somebody who doesn't work at your company, right? Even though they have everything else, if you only want somebody who does it the way your company does it, then you don't want somebody who doesn't work here. And so we've got to figure out, what do we really need, and then what do we want? And the wants are not as important as the needs. And the wants should be very flexible so that you give an opportunity to more people and businesses to be able to participate.
Willie, anything to add?
I'll just add, it was a little surprising to me because in DC, you know, 1 out of every 4 people are attorneys. So it's not that difficult in that regard. Financial services is something, and Commissioner Greer-Gillis from our commission, this has been a point that she has championed since she came onto the commission, that when we use financial services consultants, that we make sure that we can do the mentoring, find a firm that if we can't find someone to be a prime, find someone who can be a sub that can be trained to be a prime.
So one of the resolutions that was passed in our subcommittee this summer policy summit was supporting diversity in financial and all professional services for investor-owned utilities. So we're really excited about that, and thank you, Chairman Phillips, for your help with that. So what about firms that can't get minority certification but are hiring diverse candidates? Is there a way to give them credit, or should we give them credit?
So I will say that the certification of firms as diverse is a very tricky thing, and I'll tell you why. Because when companies have a diverse spend goal, 10%, 20%, 30%, I have members who do business with your companies who are diverse and do not certify and do not tell you that they are diverse. Because what they believe and what they have seen is that then the amount of business that they are allowed to do decreases because I have now been moved into this bucket. Real or imagined, there are quite a few firms that are owned by African Americans and women that will not tell you that they are diverse because they do not want to be locked into that 20%, 10%, whatever the goal is for that particular firm. And so we got to kind of think about how we maneuver around that. Companies, on the other hand, say, wow, I want to be able to count them because maybe it gets me to the billion-dollar round table. Maybe it just makes my number look bigger. There are whole kinds of reasons. But people are deliberate about it. And so I think we got to figure out, there is value to certification, but you got to kind of figure out the why. Why, I mean, I think to Susan's point, why are we doing this in the first place? Because if it's just to meet a number, I will tell you that that has absolutely no sustainability in the long term and really doesn't get you anywhere. I mean, so if the number can be the first step, but the why we're doing it ultimately is, I would say, particularly for utilities, it's about economic impact. And so I really appreciate companies, BG&E and Comet, you know, those companies that say, you know what, I'm going to hire firms that are in my locality. I'm going to spend my dollars locally. Because diversity will come as a natural result of that, right? And then you have a broader impact, as opposed to saying, well, I just want to make sure that I have 25% spent with women. And that may be where I live, and that may be, and I've had companies say, I have this great woman spend, but I'm bringing in companies from California, and I'm in Baltimore. Well, I don't know that helps you hit a number, but in the grand scheme of why we should be doing this, it has absolutely no economic impact for the people who live in that locality. And so I think certification is important, but it's more important to understand why we're doing it and then being kind of creative about how you get there. And I think it is about money and economics. At the end of the day, what we learned certainly, and I did, about the poverty simulation is that it's about economics, and your ability to lift people up is far more important than all this other stuff.
Anybody Anybody else have any thoughts on that question?
You know, interestingly, so we moved our new corporate headquarters. We brought people in from 4 different locations in suburban New Jersey and brought them into Camden, which is a city really under renaissance. At one point, it was the most violent city in the country, and it's been undergoing a renaissance. So we moved in November, and 2 months ago, we had a supplier diversity conference just for that community. And the thing that we saw was, to your point of not even getting to the point of being certified, but I don't even understand how to bid on these jobs. We've got this great idea, we've got these great folks, we don't even know how to play. So I think going back to what Paula said, remembering why you're doing this is you have to have a form to say, is this truly minority, women, disabled, or disabled veteran or veterans-owned company? But a formal certification, some of these companies are so far away from that to give them a hand up, not a handout, to help them be successful should really be the focus. And we had about 250 people show up from the Camden area, and just a tremendously successful event, and we're already able to have some spend with these folks. And I agree with Paula, we need to look locally, but also we serve 1,600 communities from coast to coast. So we have some communities that are very diverse, and we have some that aren't. So I think it has to be a mix. We want to help some of these really growing companies be able to sell not just within their community, but more broadly, but then also dedicate a certain amount that is local. So the ability to do that to the benefit of the customers and affordability, but also where everybody benefits, it is an art, not a science, but we all have to get good at it.
Can I just jump in on Paula's point about the case for diversity? And we've heard, sort of pieces of it from everyone. Susan talked about being close to the community and understanding the communities that we serve. The chairman talked about innovation. You cannot have innovation without diversity. It's anathema. But your point about local and economic development, we are necessarily businesses of the community in a way that other businesses are not. We don't have target markets. We are universal service providers. We are in every single community. And so our future is very much tied to the fate of the communities that we serve. And so if we're not thinking about building the businesses and the small businesses in our community, I think we're missing the boat. And that, to me, is another case for why we do this. And it's a really important one, and I thought that was a really good point that you made.
I think, when you do things like that, I think it completely undermines the whole reason you're doing it. And if you're going to say diversity has to be this, this, and this, now you've just completely eliminated diversity because you don't have the option to go to somewhere else or do something, and who decides, again, what that is. And so I think it is critical that you have that flexibility and to be able to go in the direction that you think is going to be right and is diverse. And again, the whole reason of why you're doing it, like Paula said, you've got to have the why. If you don't, people don't have buy-in, and they're going to be doing it not for the right reasons, and it's not going to be successful.
So Susan, you talked about, your footprint is across the country, and in Illinois, we have the Illinois Utilities Business Diversity Council, which is made up of our investor-owned utilities. They're all part of the board. Bruce Hawk, who's here, he's the president this year of the IUBDC. So in Illinois, it seems that it's happening. The spend gets larger every year. It's a focus, it's a priority, it's an initiative. But when you have a footprint from coast to coast, how do you make sure that that's happening in all of your territories? And is it something that comes from corporate all the way down to your subsidiaries? Can you talk about that?
Yes, and I think one of the things as a parent company that is in 16 states regulated, if it touches the customer, the regulator, the legislator, our states all have state presidents, and we want that local decision making, so that's very important. But nationally, we provide templates. For example, for water quality is very important. So we have a template that says, although your states may be different and you may customize, there's certain things you're going to do just because you're part of the American water system. And for example, in Illinois, with our supplier diversity efforts, rather than close to 25%, it's closer to 30%. because of some of the efforts going on in Illinois. So what we do is say, here is a national, we have one standard system that every one of our states can access that basically can see every diverse supplier across the country that we are mentoring, helping, so that it lessens the excuse there's nobody who can provide this who is a minority or women or veteran supplier. So the ability to have an infrastructure backbone that allows optionality, that allows information, education, and the understanding that with our values, this is how we do business. So I would tell you that sounds like a wishy-washy answer, but it's like Churchill said one time, democracy is the worst form of government except for all others. Being highly matrix, where you have a local touch, but you have the size, scope, and scale of a parent, is like that. But if you do it right, I think it's the most powerful of governance structures for utilities and companies. And Ann, I know you all operate the same way.
So one of the survey questions, what's the best way to train a diverse workforce for leadership positions? And the majority of the respondents said corporate leadership training, and then second was mentorships. Can you talk about the corporate leadership mentorship training in your organizations?
Yeah, I would like to start answering that question from the point of culture, and Susan, raised this earlier, and this is where, the partnership between the regulatory community and the utilities is very important, because there's certain things that only we can do, and embedding in the culture of our organizations, the appropriate approach to our workforce of the future is something that's uniquely in our hands, really. But I think that when I think about the journey around diversity and inclusion, and I love the metaphor of the, who's in the driver's seat, and do you even know where the finish line was? It kind of reminded me of the diversity and inclusion journey, and if you think about where we started, people sort of jumped in the driver's seat and hit the accelerator, the gas, and it was the gas. 15 or 20 years ago. And I don't know that anybody saw the finish line, but it was basically about, well, we hire some people of color, we hire some women, and we've kind of got it done. And I don't know that we understood the case for this effort that we're on. And then, I think we evolved. We got a little bit better at driving, and we probably had a little bit of a roadmap that looked like a treasure map with an X that was probably numbers. So we have a certain percentage of diverse people in our organization, or we have a certain percentage of supply chain that is diverse. And I think what's happened recently that is very heartening to me is that we've now recognized, finally, that it's really about the culture. It's about the culture in the organization, and it's not about asking diverse people to come into an organization and adapt to that culture, but it's about asking the organization itself to be open and adaptive to different people, bringing different things of value into the workplace. And to me, developing leaders is about having that culture that says, you don't have to be a General Patton kind of leader in order to be a successful leader and somebody who can lead in this organization. The idea of the command and control kind of model, which was very dominant, I think, in the United States for, many, that was sort of the Industrial Revolution model. I think we're working away from that, but it's really embedded in the culture of the organization, and that the culture says, we accept different styles and types of leadership as long as it's effective, as long as you can bring people with you and motivate people, we're open to that. And to me, it starts with that culture. And so there's training that you can give people, but you really have to have the culture wrap around, or you can do all the training you want, and you're not going to get people to jump out and excel and bring their best to work.
I agree. I want to say that opportunity, and I say opportunity is everything, but training is what breeds success. And I want to give a hat tip to some of the commissions here, the Mississippi Commission, the Arkansas Commission, where they've had multiple day and all-day trainings, where they brought in companies, they brought in suppliers, they brought in recent graduates, and they put them together in the same room and said, you, look at you, make this work. And I want to say that, I'm giving them a hat tip because I'm still in the same idea. We're going to do it in DC as well. We're going to bring everybody together, and we're going to make sure that we do what it takes to have some success.
I would just add that I think, as an association, we have been the beneficiaries of support from a lot of the commissioners in the room. Commissioner Betkoski and I have been at this for we started at the same time, a super long time. But having ComEd and Exelon support the association, having American Water support isn't about the financial support, but it provides an opportunity for people to get the kind of professional development and mentoring and sponsorship that may not exist within your organization. Your ability to fellowship and meet other people and get ideas from what's going on in other organizations and bring that back to your own company not only makes you better at what you do, but quite frankly makes you far more enthusiastic about the work that you do when you meet others. And so I often tell people, I'm in energy for 30 years because I loved the people I met at ABE. And the fact that I got to learn about this business with those people made me want to stay in the business and not do something else. And so mentorship is important. And it doesn't have to be formal, right? When I speak with students, I say, find the person who you trust to tell you the truth, especially when you don't want to hear it, especially when it's something that you're not going to want to hear. That's the person who should be your mentor. And be deliberate about being open to that kind of criticism when it comes. And so I think it's all of that. And it's things like ERGs. It's things like providing support to community organizations that are important to your employees. All of that stuff connects people not only to your company, but to each other as employees, and then begins to get other people to want to come and work for you, right? Your reputation as an organization matters. And I think companies don't necessarily always recognize that we have our own personal networks, right? As African Americans, it may be my sorority, my fraternity, the links, my church, all kinds of organizations. And we do talk about how companies treat us. And we're very honest and clear and direct about that. And so there is a reputation out there. And so, I'm pleased. I'm sitting on stage with companies that have exceptional reputations. And people say, that's a company where I see African American and women and Latino leaders at every level of the organization. And I see people having flexibility and having opportunity to do things that are new and different. And so others are like, okay, well, if I'm going to look for something, I want to work at Exelon. I want to work at American Water because I know there's opportunities for growth. And so it's not only what's going on in your organization, but what goes on outside and who you support that I think matters.
The one thing I would add is, from a cultural standpoint, from a company, you talk about corporate training, I would broaden that to how you select your leaders, what's important. Before you look even at technical capability, it is, first of all, in our company, what is their record on safety, of keeping every employee safe? And the second thing is, how do they view everybody else? Do they make the people they lead better? Do they have the confidence to lead by developing? And one of the things we did at our company about 3 years ago that was pretty radical was our employees have performance goals every year. And we decided that the weighting would be 50% on the whats and 50% on the hows. So you had your goals that you were supposed to achieve, whether they were operational, safety, customer sat, but 50% of it was how you got those done. Frontline employees and leaders, meaning our values of safety, of trust, which encompasses integrity and all. It is environmental leadership for us. It is high performance and it's teamwork. And so someone could be delivering the bottom line numbers, but 50% of their performance evaluation was based on how they got those numbers and how they achieved those goals. And that sent, probably of all the things we did, that sent one of the biggest messages that it's not just what you do, it's how you do it. And hiring leaders where you really know, how do you feel about developing your folks? How do you feel? Do I look, and you've been in 3 jobs, and everybody that reports to you looks like you, regardless of what that is. So I think before you even get to the training, and also the hard stuff, we have let people go who couldn't get on the train culturally. We gave them a chance. We gave them counseling, 6 months to a year. But at some point, people decide this is a culture that I can excel in or it's not. And we wish them well, but it probably won't happen at our company.
Great. So we are almost out of time, and I just want to thank each and every one of you so much for being here this morning, for talking to the audience about, these thought-provoking issues that can sometimes be a little uncomfortable, but I'm so glad you were here. All of you are, my role models here, so thank you so much, and I really appreciate this. Please join me in giving them a round of applause.